Since 9/11, organized crime and terrorist groups have increasingly influenced one another. These groups have gone beyond coexisting and are now sharing organizational knowledge and experiences. Terrorist groups are now benefiting from the previous criminal expertise of their recruits, for example, in counterfeiting documents and financially benefiting from the trafficking of arms, persons, or the illegal trade in natural resources. This nexus between transnational organized crime and terrorism has intensified the threat to international peace and security. In order to assist states with understanding and combating this complex challenge, the Global Counterterrorism Forum, GCTF, has developed the Hague Good Practices on the nexus between transnational organized crime and terrorism. As a starting point, states should aim to understand all aspects of the nexus. Non-governmental organizations, victims, survivors, and former members of terrorist and organized crime groups are important sources of information in this context. States should support research into the organizational composition of criminal and terrorist networks, their use of technology, and their sources of funding. Robust gender-based analysis, crucial in addressing the root causes of the crime-terrorism nexus, should be applied to all research on the nexus. In order to strip transnational organized crime and terrorist groups of their financial resources, states need to understand and investigate the various economies that exist within their borders. For example, a significant characteristic of these organized groups are their ties with informal, illegal economies. It is also crucial that states take a hardline stance to root out corruption, which these groups utilize to facilitate and prolong their activities. In addition, states should legislate to allow the relevant authorities to target illegal financial flows. Organized crime and terrorist groups frequently use existing routes and human flows in regions with under-policed and porous borders to carry out their activities. As the nexus continues to evolve, timely data collection, analysis, and data exchange are important. These activities should be supported by sustained cooperation and intelligence sharing among cross-border agencies, such as Customs and Border Agencies, Europol, and Interpol. This type of cooperation is crucial. In the field of cybercrime, such cooperation between states and other relevant agencies is particularly important. Developing alternative sources of information, such as prison intelligence or private sector partners like banks, is encouraged, as prisons can be places of recruitment, radicalization, and knowledge transfer. Any information sharing must adhere to all relevant data protection rules. To improve intelligence collection and prevention efforts, Nexus-specific training is highly recommended for police, security, prosecution, prison and probation services, and the judiciary. Police and security personnel should be trained to differentiate between transnational organized crime, terrorism, and petty crime, and how to disrupt Nexus activities facilitated via the Internet. For prosecution services and the judiciary, it is important to have a clear understanding of how to prosecute and sentence those who have committed offences related to both organised crime and terrorism. In this context, domestic legislation must provide sufficient powers to identify, investigate, prosecute, and sentence individuals for such acts. Discouraging individuals from joining organised crime and terrorism groups is one important aspect of states' efforts to combat the crime-terror nexus. Therefore, it is important to raise community awareness on how these groups disrupt local community development. It is equally important to offer appropriate legal protections for those who become witnesses and whistleblowers. Sustainable Nexus-specific rehabilitation and reintegration programs with community involvement should also be developed. Finally, due to the evolving nature of transnational organized crime and terrorism, any new measures or modifications to existing legislation and rehabilitation and reintegration policies should specifically address the environmental factors and the root causes that facilitate the nexus. It is vital that all counter-terrorism and anti-crime efforts comply with international human rights norms and the rule of law. Read the full text of the Hague Good Practices on the nexus between transnational organized crime and terrorism on the GCTF website. www.thegctf.org.